I want to talk about some of the origins of Trumpism. Trump is part of a trend that we are seeing in many countries around the world of strongman rule. We've seen this in Hungary, in India, in Turkey, in El Salvador. And in each case, you get a leader who wants to rule without legislation, without law, or beyond legislation and the law. Trump has been doing this since his second term, issuing executive orders from day one, and in many cases those executive orders contradict what seem to be pretty clearly stated rules or even constitutional principles. Why is this happening? In my last book, Liberalism and Its Discontents, I pointed to two deformations of liberalism. The first was neoliberalism, what's generally understood to be a extreme form of market capitalism that eliminates, it privatizes industries, it takes away regulation, and has led to a lot of the inequality, the economic inequality that we've seen. The second deformation is what you might call woke liberalism, identity politics, in which you've actually abandoned the liberal principle of the universal equality of all human beings and divided people into groups based on their marginalized status. But I think there's a third deformation of liberalism, or maybe it's not even a deformation, maybe it's in certain ways intrinsic to liberalism, which I would call excessive proceduralism. Now, a liberal society, by my definition, is based on a rule of law. That is to say, power, government power, is limited by the law and by constitutional checks and balances. I think, however, that in many liberal societies, and particularly in the United States, there's been an accumulation of law to the point where you might say there's a little bit too much rule of law. The legal scholar Nick Bagley calls this the procedural fetish. Bagley was the legal advisor to Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan and teaches at the Michigan Law School today. He notes that many liberals and progressives want the government to do more things, but they also believe that legitimacy lies in following procedures. And as a result, there's too much law. There are too many laws constraining the operations of government, and so they can't do things like build high-speed rail or adequate housing in major cities, especially in blue states. Now, the reason that you have this accumulation of procedures comes from a couple of different sources. Of course, government was distrusted by conservatives right from the beginning. In the 1930s, the rise of the New Deal administrative state provoked strong opposition to quote-unquote unelected bureaucrats on the part of conservatives. But liberals themselves, beginning in the 1960s, also turned against the government. They had used the government during the New Deal to do things like build a Tennessee Valley Authority and other infrastructure projects. But beginning in the 60s, you had the rise of public interest law. People like Ralph Nader began to argue that the government was actually not acting in public interest. It was not doing things on behalf of social justice. It was actually captured by economic interests, and the government itself needed to be constrained. And so there was this strange horseshoe connection between progressives and conservatives who both agreed that the government had been the problem, had become the big problem, and they used the law to further constrain government. This, I think, comes out of a long-standing tradition in American political culture not to trust government and therefore to limit its reach and its powers through an extensive set of laws and procedures. Now, this has led to a lot of, I think, unexpected and unfortunate consequences because in many cases, governments and government bureaucrats focus on procedural correctness rather than on getting actual results for citizens. And in fact, the United States political system, which is built around a system of checks and balances, has become what I've labeled a vetocracy, meaning rule by veto. The United States system has many more veto points than other democracies, where different parts of the political system can stop things that they don't like. If you compare the US to the British Westminster system, the US government is far more constrained by checks and balances. We distribute power very broadly. We have an important and powerful upper house that is necessary to pass legislation, confirm ambassadors, sign treaties. We have a system of federalism which distributes power to states and localities. We have an independent Supreme Court that can invalidate legislation that it believes is unconstitutional. And throughout this complex system, there are many points in which projects can be stopped. The British Westminster system, at least the classic one, by contrast, was at the other end of the scale. A simple 50% plus one majority in the British Parliament was sufficient to pass any piece of legislation. There was no Bill of Rights that constrained the government from acting. The only real constraint in the classic Westminster system was the next election. Beyond the Constitution in the United States, there are other veto points. A good example of this is the California Environmental Quality Act, otherwise known as CEQA, which gives all 40 million residents of California standing to litigate against any project, public or private, that they don't like. And as a result, it is very, very difficult to build things in California because they are subject to multiple CEQA lawsuits. So this is a basic problem in democratic politics. Public policies seek to achieve some kind of a public good, especially an infrastructure project, a bridge or a roadway or an airport that is meant to serve a general interest. But you cannot build anything. You cannot build an infrastructure project without hurting certain concentrated private interests. And the political system really needs to reconcile this division, reconcile a broad public interest with the individual narrow interests of the individuals that may be hurt. And our system tends to favor those individuals. It makes it much easier for them to stop projects that they don't like. Now, the question is, how is this related to Trumpism? I think that Donald Trump or Elon Musk back in the day when he was leading Doge have direct experience of this kind of vetocracy. They both have attempted to build things. They've both seen the kinds of obstacles that the American system puts up to their actions. And I think that their solution was to simply disregard the law and in many cases avoid or go around it. There are many instances of this in the Trump administration. You had the firing of officials. You had things like the demolition of the East Wing, which was not done according to the rules that had been established for public buildings in Washington, D.C. They've been free to ignore the rules on asylum and the legal treatment of refugees, and as a result have violated the rights of many individuals. Now, I think that the real issue is to find a middle way between Trumpism and the old status quo, because the old status quo was a vetocracy, and I don't think that it was really acceptable. We actually have an opportunity, once Trump is out of the picture and there's a different administration in place, to fix that old system and to make sure that it does not simply constrain the government from doing anything positive. There has to be a middle way between the kind of lawless executive authority exercised by the Trump administration and a legal, consent-based system that nonetheless finds it easier to make decisions in the common interest and to once again get America to be able to build things. How in particular we will go about doing this will be the subject for further podcasts on this channel. If you enjoy the channel and you like this content, please subscribe to my Frankly Fukuyama YouTube channel. You can also see references to various blog posts I've written for American Purpose on the Persuasion website that will be referenced in the comments below. Thank you very much for listening.